La macchina da corsa per me è come un figlio. Quando lei pensa che il figlio rappresenta la continuità di noi stessi, lei lo porta a scuola, il giorno che riesce negli studi che è il primo della classe.
Yes, I know you're in shock right now. I am a little bit too. Well then, let's talk about the electric Ferrari Luce. The name Luce means light, and it shows Ferrari's path into the light, into the future. And well, this car is certainly not Enzo Ferrari's child, since Enzo Ferrari has already passed away, but it does carry the Ferrari DNA within it. However, it is much more of a, well, I could say love child of Jonathan Ive and Mark Newson, since this design, which I am sure is quite divisive, came from their studio, as I am also struggling to find the words for it right now. But Jonathan Ive is very dear to me since he designed the first iPhone and so many other Apple products. Mark Newson designed the Apple Watch, and these people told Ferrari, let's make something forward-looking, something different, since this is an electric Ferrari. Why should it be the same as any other Ferrari? And I am very glad that it didn't become a huge SUV, it didn't become an electric Ferrari Puro Sangue, but rather they put something quite forward-looking, quite cyber, quite futuristic on the table. And yes, at first glance, the whole design is incredibly strange, and if it didn't have the Ferrari logo on it, I wouldn't know what car it is, but now we will know, since I'm going to introduce it to you. The most interesting part of the car is this huge continuous glass panel with the windshield, and naturally air goes in here to generate as much downforce as possible, and essentially they built the body around a shell shape, and these convex forms are basically floating. It's as if the entire body is floating around the cabin. It's insanely cool. I can see the design in it. I can see that they really wanted this to be something completely different, and I think they absolutely succeeded. It's another question whether this might need to be refined in the future, because, for example, I think the daytime running light is a bit hidden, but the components of the headlight are completely transparent here at the headlight. There is an air intake for cooling the battery, but I really like this part the most, the way the air glides through here. It's a bit Lotus-like, by the way. What I really don't like are the two windshield wipers, which were put here because they couldn't be placed anywhere else. So this is what happens when you want to design a car that comes from the future, but at the same time you need to wipe the windshield, and you can't put the wiper here because it would catch the air. That's why they put it here on the side. It reminds me a bit of the Cybertruck. And then, well, 23-inch rims in the front and 24-inch aero rims in the back. You can also order it with 5-spoke rims, and of course, there's a carbon ceramic brake system behind the wheels, which we don't see here, so I definitely wouldn't buy it with these rims. Sure, the 5-spoke design adds 5% to the range and looks much, much better, so 23 and 24-inch wheels. And by the way, this makes this 5-meter car, which is only 3.5 centimeters longer than, for example, the Audi e-tron, about which I recently made a video. So this is a damn long car, but still, if I were to look at it, I would think it's a 4.5-meter car because of the huge wheels. The wheelbase is almost 3,000 millimeters, but these huge rims shrink the design of the body so much and make this 5-meter length look quite small that the car ends up having a completely different shape. Then here, for example, is this air vent. Here too, we can see a Ferrari logo. It fits the design very, very well, and the car is low. This is not an SUV, it comes up to my neck. And well, you can see that this is a relatively low car. Of course, the battery has to be put somewhere, so it's not the height of a Ferrari 458, which would be about this much. But this is a 5-seater family car, and I think for a 5-seater family car, this size and these proportions are perfectly fine. Another interesting feature, since we're already at the side of the car, is the opening of the rear door, as it opens in a suicide door style, like the BMW i3 or Rolls-Royces, for example. They didn't miss this little trick that if we're already doing something with this shell-shaped cell, then the doors should open this way, which of course has its advantages. It's very comfortable to get in, very convenient to put in a child, a puppy, a Peking geese, or anything else. However, if someone comes along while you're getting out, the door might get ripped off. That's why they call it a suicide door. But it's damn cool. What I really like is this carbon fiber C-pillar here. It looks insanely cool. You don't really see this on average cars. Here is the charging port and this massive rear wheel rim. Look at this. This 24-inch rim reaches all the way to here. This car is completely, absolutely insane. And if we look at the back, it reminds me a little bit of the Jaguar I-Pace. But the rear was designed this way to improve aerodynamics and downforce. By the way, the drag coefficient is 0.254. Yes, 0.254, which isn't considered good, but as it turned out, it ended up being relatively high for a reason. For comparison, for example, a Mercedes EQS has a drag coefficient of 0.2, so this is much worse. However, it's because this car is capable of 310 kilometers per hour and it needs downforce so it doesn't fly away like a victory flag, and it also generates downforce at the rear, plus they chopped off its tail like that because of the air resistance. I think this design is starting to grow on me now that I'm standing next to it and not just looking at it from afar. Like, I've had the chance to admire it from a distance for about 2 hours until now, so up close it's quite different, but I already know you guys are going to tear it apart. And believe me, Johnny Ive doesn't usually make mistakes. And let's just remember that back in the day, the first iPhone was also torn to shreds, saying it was too big, it didn't have a keyboard, no MMS, and who even needs this? And we know how that ended up. I think the back of the car turned out really well. The front is much more divisive in my opinion, but I really like the back. Starting with the rear brake lights modeled after the 458 Italia, it carries its DNA. There is Ferrari DNA in this car, like the Ferrari logo fits here very well. There is no rear wing, the rear wing doesn't pop up, but the air blows through here. I can reach my hand through it, I can reach in here, and this shell-shaped passenger cell starting from the front allows the air to flow all the way through, coming in from the front under the front spoiler element and exiting here at the back. It's a bit Apple-esque. I can really feel the touch of Johnny Ive and Mark Newson in it. It's really very obvious that they worked on this car. It's completely different from previous Ferraris, and in fact completely different from any car we've seen in the world so far. And even this little upward curl here helps with the airflow and generates a bit of downforce. The trunk size is 597 liters. The trunk is huge, and for a family car, I think that's not insignificant, so they didn't make the mistake of creating a sporty 5-seater car with only a 400-liter trunk. 597 liters is a lot, and while I'm here, I'll just sit in the back. It's incredibly comfortable. Typically, with electric cars, the issue is that your thighs don't fully rest on the seat cushion is too low. Well, Ferrari paid attention to this, or rather Johnny Ive and his team paid attention to this. You can sit incredibly comfortably here in the back seats. It doesn't have that typical electric sedan problem, and the floor isn't too high. And this is a 5-seater car, and the seat cushion is a bit firmer here in the middle, but if you really need to, you can fit 5 people in it. So the back area is quite wide, and you can really sit comfortably in it. The 5th person is borderline, but here is a perfect little storage compartment, a huge panoramic roof, and this is absolutely Apple-like. It's as if I was sitting in an Apple car. Do you know what's on this car? Not a Ferrari logo, but an Apple logo. It's clearly visible that Johnny Ive's handiwork is in it. The interior looks insanely cool. And I haven't even talked about the switches yet, but I'll show those in the front. You could say the exterior is weird, or you could say anything about this car, or why a Ferrari needs to be an electric car, why an electric car at all, but I'll talk about that too. However, what's certain is that this interior is simply perfect. Let's start with the key. Here's the Ferrari key with the e-ink display, which is, well, heavy. If you hold it in your hand, it might just weigh down your pocket. Here are the 3 buttons on the back that we can use to lock and unlock the car, but if we place it into the center console and press it down a little, it sinks in and starts to light up. The Italian flag appears on it, and that's when we can start the car. You don't need to press a start-stop button. The key is the start-stop button. This is where the finer details begin. If I touch this center console, it feels exactly like touching the back of an iPhone because it's the same matte Gorilla Glass that we've already come to know and feel on iPhones, and they figured out back then what it feels like to touch, and this is just as good. And here, there is the same glossy Gorilla Glass as on all the displays, which, by the way, are dual displays behind dual glass, and there are also analog gauges, like on the stopwatch, which, if we pull the launch control lever, as if we were pulling something in a fighter jet, will switch the stopwatch to a 5-second countdown. How cool of an idea is that? Things like this can really only be thought up by Johnny and his team, and we don't see things like this in any other car. And really, this launch control thing with these aluminum switches, and here on the center display too, which isn't too big and can be rotated, so it can be turned towards the passenger if they want to press something on the navigation or the climate control or anything else. With this handle, you can grab onto it and tilt it in any direction. And it's not a very large display because it's 12 inches like an iPad. And it's just like that here too. Anodized aluminum everywhere. These are also made of anodized aluminum, simply beautiful to look at and to touch. And then there's this beautiful steering wheel, which is quite thin, but I know why. It's because this steering wheel was inspired by the Ferrari 250 Europa and resembles it just in a more modern guise. It's the same beautiful anodized aluminum. You can grip it on the outside. By the way, I've touched it and every single tenth of a millimeter is meticulously crafted. This is not some plastic steering wheel. Here in the center, the Ferrari logo is behind glass. Next to the Manettino, the suspension adjustment button is made of glass. Everything is made of glass. Everything has a beautiful frame. Everything clicks and clacks in a way that is just perfect. Whatever I press here, it's simply perfect. Here we can adjust the torque so it doesn't rip our heads off because after all, this is a 1,000 horsepower car. We can adjust the torque and it can be set in 5 levels. So we can do that if we know a sharper turn is coming and we don't want to accelerate too aggressively. We can adjust the torque and the car will adapt accordingly. And obviously besides this, we can also set it to ice mode, wet mode, dry sport, and ESC off mode. So if we pull the Manettino, just like in any Ferrari, we will be able to put it into a completely unrestricted mode. And then here we also have a range, a tour, and a performance mode selector, and the cruise control button is also a beautiful little switch. The instrument cluster is truly something perfect. The fact that they put an analog needle on the digital OLED display and it feels exactly like looking at analog instruments. The only difference is that when we switch modes, everything changes and all the lighting changes in the colorful sport mode, for example. Oh my God, guys, you have to see this in person sometime if you can, because it's impossible to describe in words how well crafted everything is. This air vent, the ventilation grill, the way I turn it, it's just so Apple-like. Honestly, this could be an Apple car. This is how I would imagine an Apple car, just not with 1,000 horsepower, but maybe with 200 or 300 horsepower. And how great it would be if there was something like this, because you can design things like this when people like that take charge of the interior and exterior. But let's stick with the interior, because I think that's what turned out truly perfect. So you can make cars like this in 2026, cars that are simply perfect. And this isn't just the most perfectly crafted Ferrari with its switches, buttons, and dashboard. I think if you look at all cars, the entire automotive industry, this is perhaps the car made with the most perfect materials. And of course, I know there are Rolls Royces with all their glitz and glamour and wood inlays, but in terms of this design, this car takes the cake right now. Small storage compartments lined with Alcantara. The seats are also very retro, by the way. You can see that this design was inspired by older Ferraris. It's perfectly comfortable. The side support is adequate, though maybe it could have a little bit more side support. I simply cannot find any fault with everything I see here. The menu buttons, the settings, the software is very fast, and it's designed very beautifully. You can also see that this was designed by Apple-minded people who know how to design something beautiful. This isn't like those crude graphics in the BYD. It's not like the 10-year-old outdated software in the Audi e-tron right now. You really look at it and then you just wave it off. This is simply perfect. No matter which detail you look at, it turned out beautiful, and obviously metal pedals and everything else you need. I assume by now you've reached the point of wondering whether the Luce will sound like, say, this 12-cylinder Ferrari, and the answer is no. It will have a completely different sound. Ferrari didn't want to simulate a V8 or V12 engine, like, for example, the recently introduced AMG GT Mercedes electric 4-door coupe. Ferrari came up with the idea that the electric motor has a sound. It squeals like a pig, but obviously there are a lot of harmonics, a lot of vibrations, and they pick these up from the electric motors and the axles with a pickup similar to a guitar, and they filter out the harmonics that don't sound good. I don't know how good this will be. For now, we've only seen a very poor quality GoPro recording of Hamilton and Leclerc driving the prototype. And well, this sound didn't really convince me, but we'll see it in person. And the other question is, how much will the Luce cost? Well, not as much as this 2012 Ferrari, because that's 400,000 euros. The Luce will cost much more. They're estimating the price at 500 to 550,000 euros. Yeah, I guess you guys are picking your jaws up off the floor now, and so am I. When I heard that, I just stared blankly and couldn't really find the words. So whoever wants to buy the electric Ferrari will have to shell out 550,000 euros, which isn't really an electric car, but a Ferrari that just happens to have an electric powertrain. And let's talk a few words about the electric part of the car. Well, there's nothing to be ashamed of there either. They put a 122 kilowatt-hour battery in it, 122. I'll say it again, that's big, so by any standard, it's big. In addition, the battery is 800 volts. It can be charged at 350 kilowatts. It can be charged from 10 to 80% in 20 minutes. And on top of all that, we have 4 electric motors. One electric motor on each of the 4 wheels with a total power of 1,050 and 10,500 Newton meters of torque measured at the wheel. 0 to 100 acceleration is 2.5 seconds. 0 to 200 is 6.8 seconds. It can do almost the same as a Ferrari Testarossa, which is really wild, I'll say it again. A real monster from a 5-seater family car. Of course, we've seen this before. For example, Mercedes just introduced the AMG GT that's similar too. Or the Tesla Model S Plaid with 1,000 horsepower and everything. So we know that with electric cars, we can reach this performance relatively easily. The range is 530 kilometers, but that's not really the WLTP range. It's more like the kind of range you get when you drive a Ferrari. So I suspect that if we don't push it, it can go much further than that with a battery this size. But if we use it the way a Ferrari should be used, then Ferrari says we can go around 530 kilometers with it. But otherwise, you're not going to take a family car to a racetrack, although you could take it there too, but it will be perfectly suitable for normal driving. I won't go into this now since I've already said it a million times about electric cars, because you'll be able to drive to Rome with it, even stopping a few times to charge the car. And what's also interesting is that I won't be showing the driving experience now since we can't drive the cars yet. That will be measurable by the end of the year, but they say that this is a 2,260 kilogram car, which is perfectly fine for a 5-meter electric car, but it feels 400 kilograms lighter while driving because the chassis underneath is so good and the torque vectoring system is so good. Obviously, it had all the bells and whistles with adaptive suspension. I don't even want to get into that right now because I don't believe it. I'll believe it when I can drive the car. The question is rather, who is this car made for? I can tell you, for those who don't want to go to the grocery store with the family in a 458 Italia, it was made for those who already have a Ferrari and would like a family Ferrari, and let's say they don't choose the Puro Sangue because they want to charge at home, and they like new technology, they like the new design, they like futuristic cars. This Ferrari was made for them. I don't know how many they will sell of it. In China, I think they will sell like hotcakes, because if we look at this car through Chinese eyes, then it turned out perfect. From a European perspective, it's a bit strange, but honestly, this design is really starting to grow on me, and I'd love to drive it like crazy. Thank you very much for watching this episode and dropping a like. Write your opinion in the comments, which I'm sure you will do.